What if the darkest secret of Hollywood's golden age had nothing to do with affairs, drug-related deaths, or studio cover-ups, but with identity itself? Behind the diamonds, the soft glow of old Hollywood glamour, and the lies sold to the public, there were stars who turned their entire lives into a performance, even after the cameras stopped rolling. Julian Eltinge built an empire on a transformation so flawless that audiences were stunned by the man hidden behind the illusion. Billy Tipton lived for decades as a respected male musician, until the truth about his birth didn't truly explode into public view until after his death. They were not just entertainers chasing fame. They were also people forced to hide in plain sight in an era that could destroy them simply for being exposed. And trust me, one story on this list is even harder to believe than anything you've imagined. Number 1. Divine. Before he became Divine, Harris Glenn Milstead was already the kind of person the world around him never quite knew what to do with. He grew up in Baltimore carrying extra weight from an early age, with a softness that did not fit the version of masculinity society expected to see, and a sense of not belonging that Hollywood would later exploit without ever truly forgiving. Then John Waters turned him into Divine, a figure who was never meant to be loved in any ordinary way. Divine did not step onto the screen to make people comfortable. He showed up to disrupt, to shock, to turn discomfort into something impossible to forget. In Pink Flamingos, then Female Trouble and Polyester, Divine did not feel like a movie star. He felt more like a raw, confrontational explosion thrown straight into the face of an America trying to cling to its polished, fake respectability. And that was where the tragedy already began. The public could gasp, laugh, recoil, even be disgusted, but they still looked. And Hollywood has always been far better at consuming someone different as a spectacle than protecting them as a human being. What makes Divine's story more painful than many people realize is that behind the fierce makeup, the oversized dresses, and the kind of energy that nearly swallowed the entire frame, there was real talent. He had timing, instinct, and the kind of screen presence that made it hard to look away, even when he was making people uncomfortable. By 1988, when Hairspray came out, Divine was no longer just the face of outrageous outsider cinema. He was standing right at the edge of something bigger, with Edna Turnblad, a role that was funny, warm, and just revealing enough to show that he could step outside the box people had kept him trapped in for years. But just as people were finally beginning to see the talent behind the paint and the attitude, his body could no longer carry him any further. On March 7, 1988, Divine died in his sleep at a hotel in Los Angeles. He was only 42. According to the Los Angeles Times, he weighed around 300 pounds and died of heart disease linked to his severe weight. What made his death even more heartbreaking was how close it came to the opportunity he had waited nearly his whole life for. Just one day later, Divine was supposed to report to the set of Married with Children, a clear sign that he was no longer being seen only as a shock figure from outrageous underground films, but was finally reaching the doorstep of mainstream television. And then he collapsed right before he could walk through it. All his life, Divine had been seen as too much, too loud, too strange, like someone born to leave audiences stunned. And yet his ending came with a kind of cold cruelty. No spotlight, no applause, no final entrance, just a hotel room and a body that could not endure anymore. Just as Hollywood finally seemed ready to accept Divine as a real talent, his heart stopped on the edge of a morning that might have changed the rest of his life. Number 2. Billy Tipton. Billy Tipton was not the kind of star who stepped out onto red carpets or into premiere spotlights. He came out of something much quieter than that, being shut out from the very beginning. Born in 1914 in Oklahoma City and raised in Kansas City after his parents divorced, Billy learned piano and then saxophone. But while he was still being seen as a young girl, he was denied the chance to join the school band. Out of that early wound, another self began to take shape. Around the age of 20, Billy started experimenting with men's clothing, and a few years later, He was living fully as a man, stepping into the life of a working musician as if it were not just a career choice, but the only door still open to him. In the years that followed, Billy moved through VFW halls, Elks clubs, and small dance band venues in the Benny Goodman mold, carrying with him a saxophone, a piano, and a masculine identity held so tightly that almost no one was allowed near it. Women traveled with him on the road, later became long-term partners, and in time, he adopted 3 sons. On the surface, it looked like a perfectly ordinary life for an aging jazz musician. Playing gigs, building a family, driving a motorhome, attending Boy Scout outings, showing up for parent meetings, grilling in the backyard. But that surface normalcy is exactly what makes the story so chilling. Because the more convincingly Billy looked like a father, a husband, an ordinary man people recognized, the less room he had to let his guard down. This was no longer a performance on a stage. It was a life that had to be maintained through discipline, silence, and constant vigilance. Billy's appearance in his later years carried that same feeling. He did not look like a glamorous figure, but like a man growing old quietly in Spokane, about 5'5", with a high voice, soft features, and almost no facial hair, living with such consistency that neighbors could remember his car leaving each morning at the same familiar time, along the same familiar route. After his marriage ended, Billy spent the last 10 years of his life in a trailer, staying within just a few miles of home. Then, in his final month, that car stopped leaving. Neighbors knew he was sick, but he still refused to go to the hospital. The Los Angeles Times reported that Billy died on January 21, 1989, at the age of 74 from a bleeding ulcer. People around him believed he would rather endure the pain than risk having his secret exposed in a clinic or hospital. A few days later, when the funeral home revealed the truth to his family, the shock exploded across the country. But the saddest part was not what made the headlines. It was the fact that a person who had spent more than half a century protecting his identity still could not bear to let anyone see him in a moment of weakness. Billy did not collapse under the lights. He bled quietly in the dark, protecting a life he had built out of silence. Number 3. Gladys Bentley. With Gladys Bentley, the tragedy begins with the fact that she never truly fits the frame of secretly born male, because Gladys was, in fact, a woman. But that is exactly what made her an even more violent collision with her time. In 1920s Harlem, Gladys did not step onto the stage like the kind of female singer the public was used to seeing. She appeared in a white tuxedo, wearing a top hat, seated at the piano with a kind of swagger that seemed to challenge the entire room. Her deep, rich voice, her bold flirtation, and the way she openly played with the boundaries between masculine and feminine turned her into the kind of phenomenon that drew people in, even as it made them uneasy. Gladys was never trying to make anyone comfortable. She came out as if she were forcing America to look directly at the very thing it most wanted to avoid. Someone like Gladys could shine brilliantly at night, surrounded by piano music, hard liquor, and the freedom of the Harlem Renaissance. But as America grew more conservative, the very things that once made her unforgettable slowly became the reasons she was pushed to the margins. The more honestly she lived, the more she was treated like something out of line. The public could enjoy Gladys's rebellion as long as it stayed inside a nightclub and remained a source of entertainment. But the society of that era was never willing to fully accept the real person standing behind the spotlight. The saddest part is that a star who once lived so loudly was ultimately forced to shrink herself down just to fit inside her era's fear, judgment, and hypocrisy. Even Gladys's appearance in her final years carried that same sadness. She was no longer the woman in the white tuxedo who could make all of Harlem turn and stare. Instead, she gradually began appearing in a softer, more traditionally feminine image, with neatly styled hair, as if she were trying to wear a version of herself that society considered safer. In 1952, she appeared in Ebony magazine with the article, "I Am a Woman Again," almost like a public declaration of returning to the norm. But what gives the story its chill is that, even now, many people believe it was not necessarily freedom, but possibly a way to survive in a world growing harsher around her. Gladys Bentley died in 1960 at the age of 52. She had once made it impossible for audiences to look away. But in the end, what that era wanted most was for her to become smaller, quieter, and less herself. And that is the saddest part of all. Number 4. Danny LaRue. Danny LaRue was not the kind of figure who shocked the public because some buried secret was suddenly exposed. He was the kind of performer who captivated audiences so completely that they sometimes forgot there was still a real man beneath all that glittering glamour. Born Daniel Patrick Carroll, he built his fame around a female stage persona that was polished, elegant, and so carefully perfected that almost no one else in British entertainment could match it. At his peak, Danny had his own nightclub in the West End, appeared constantly on television, was adored by royalty and high society, and became one of the most famous female impersonators in Britain. What set him apart was that he did not turn women into a joke. He turned that image into something dazzling, sophisticated, and appealing enough for mainstream audiences to embrace. But that kind of glamour does not last forever. As the times changed, the stage no longer lifted him the way it once had, and his body began to give way as well. Danny had once owned hotels, lived in a large home, and enjoyed a life of real luxury. But later, the tide turned. The money thinned out, his career slowed down, and his world gradually grew smaller. In 2006, he suffered a mild stroke while vacationing in Spain, and from that point on, his final performances had to be cancelled. Then came more strokes, along with a long battle with prostate cancer and later throat cancer. The man who had once lived among feathers, spotlights, and laughter slowly became an elderly figure, weaker, less visible, and increasingly removed from the stage that had once been his whole life. That is why Danny's appearance in his final years carried such a clear sadness. He was no longer the radiant stage woman who could make an entire room turn and stare. He was simply an aging man, thinner, quieter, living in Kent with Annie Galbraith, his close friend and former dresser. Danny LaRue died in his sleep on May 31st, 2009, at the age of 81. And that is the bitter part of his story. He spent a lifetime creating a woman the public could never forget, but in the end, the one who had to grow old in silence was the man standing behind all that glamour. Number 5. Julian Eltinge. With Julian Eltinge, what left audiences stunned was not some secret exposed years later, but the feeling that they had believed in an illusion that was simply too perfect. Born William Julian Dalton, Eltinge became one of the biggest names on the American stage in the early 20th century. He was so famous that a theater in New York was named after him. But what people could never forget was the sight of him appearing as a woman so beautiful that almost no one wanted to believe it was only a performance. Eltinge did not play women for laughs. He created a figure so soft, elegant, and convincing that the real shock only came when the wig came off. But Eltinge's tragedy also grew out of the very thing that once made him a star. America had celebrated him for that transformation, then slowly began to look at it with suspicion and distance as the times changed. As vaudeville faded and society grew more conservative, Eltinge was gradually left behind. In his final years, he was no longer the stage woman who could leave an entire theater spellbound. He was just an aging man, heavier, more worn down, and increasingly out of place in a world that no longer wanted to hold on to the very illusion it had once adored. The man who once made all of America doubt its own eyes was, in the end, quietly erased by his own era, almost without a sound. Number 6. Jim Bailey. Some performers become famous for who they are. Jim Bailey became famous for making audiences forget the real man behind the transformation. Born in Philadelphia in 1938, Bailey did far more than put on dresses, wigs, or a few feminine mannerisms. He stepped onto the stage and made Judy Garland, Barbra Streisand, and Peggy Lee seemed to come back to life right in front of the audience. The precision was no longer just entertainment. It felt like an illusion built so perfectly that people did not just watch it, they believed it. From The Ed Sullivan Show to The Tonight Show, and from Carnegie Hall to the London Palladium, Jim Bailey elevated female impersonation to a level very few ever reached. People remembered Judy, his Barbara, the women he brought back to life on stage, but very few truly remembered the man named Jim Bailey standing behind it all. The more flawless the transformation became, the more he seemed to fade from view. In his final years, Bailey was no longer the dazzling figure who could leave an entire room spellbound. He was simply an artist who had stepped away from the spotlight, living quietly in Santa Clarita. He died in 2015 at the age of 77 from cardiac arrest caused by complications from pneumonia. He spent his whole life bringing legendary women back to life, but in the end, the person the public forgot to look at most closely was him. Number 7. Charles Pierce. Charles Pierce was not the kind of performer who shocked audiences because some secret was exposed. He was the kind of artist who pulled them in so completely that they almost forgot there was still a man standing behind Bette Davis, Joan Crawford, or Tallulah Bankhead. Born in 1926 in Watertown, New York, Pierce hated being dismissed as just a female impersonator. He wanted to be seen as a real actor, and that very talent is what set him apart from so many others of his era. Pierce did not need heavy makeup or elaborate transformations to win over a crowd. With nothing more than his voice, his eyes, a slight curl of the lip, and the way he delivered a line, he could make an entire room believe that a Hollywood legend had just come back to life right in front of them. But the tragedy of Charles Pierce also lived inside that same gift. People remembered the women he became, remembered the sharpness, the wit, and the glamour of each performance, but the real man named Charles Pierce was always left standing a little farther back in the shadows. In his later years, he was no longer the dazzling figure who could set a stage on fire with laughter and astonishment. After announcing his retirement more than once, and then returning again, Pierce grew older, surrounded by illness, and eventually died of cancer and complications from a stroke at his home in North Hollywood on May 31, 1999, at the age of 72. The saddest part is this: he spent his life bringing legends back to life, but in the end, the one swallowed up by time the fastest was him. Number 8. Craig Russell Bourne. Russell Craig Eady in Toronto. Craig Russell first rose out of the gay club scene of the early 1970s before breaking through with Outrageous. In 1977, the film that earned him the Silver Bear for Best Actor in Berlin. On stage and on screen, Craig did far more than simply play a woman. He brought Mae West, Judy Garland, and Joan Crawford to life so vividly that audiences did not just watch, they believed. But the darker side of that gift was that the more perfectly he transformed, the more the real man behind it seemed to disappear. In his final years, Craig was no longer the dazzling figure from Outrageous, but a worn-down artist struggling through illness. He died in Toronto in 1990 at the age of 42 from a stroke related to AIDS complications. The saddest part is that he once made entire audiences believe in the legends he became. Yet in the end, he did not live long enough to become a legend treated fairly by time itself. Number 9. T.C. Jones. T.C. Jones was the kind of performer who did not leave audiences stunned because some secret had been exposed, but because he could walk onto a stage and make people forget they were looking at a man. Born in Pennsylvania in 1920, Jones rose through Broadway, major nightclubs, and eventually American television with his portrayals of Tallulah Bankhead, Bette Davis, Judy Garland, and Katharine Hepburn. Time once called him the finest female impersonator since Julian Eltinge, and that was no small compliment. Jones did not rely entirely on dresses or wigs. He won audiences over with his voice, His timing, his eyes, and the kind of presence that made each legendary actress seem to come back to life right in front of them. But the more flawless the transformation became, the more the real man behind it seemed to slip into the shadows. In his final years, Jones was no longer the electrifying figure from stage and television, but an artist growing older under the weight of illness. After 2 years of cancer treatment, he died in California in 1971 at the age of 50. The saddest part is this: he spent his whole life making audiences believe in the women he created, but in the end, the one erased by time the fastest was him. Number 10. Jean Malin. Jean Malin was not the kind of star remembered for safe, polished glamour. He is remembered because he stepped onto the stage too early, too openly, and too defiantly for the America of his time. Born in Brooklyn in 1908, Jean rose during Prohibition as one of the earliest openly gay performers of the pansy craze, becoming a major draw in New York speakeasies and appearing in Arizona to Broadway in 1933. He did far more than impersonate women or play for laughs. Jean moved through the audience in a tuxedo, armed with sharp lines and open provocation, as if he were forcing the room to face exactly what society wanted to keep hidden. But that era never made room for people like him for long. After a farewell performance at the Ship Cafe in Venice, California, Jean died in a car accident on August 10, 1933. He was only 25. Number 11. Ray Bourbon. Some people step onto a stage to entertain. Others step onto it and make the whole room uneasy. Ray Bourbon carried exactly that kind of energy. He appeared with a flirtatious style, razor-sharp wit, and a provocative presence that made people laugh even as it unsettled them. At a time when America was growing more hostile toward anything seen as outside the norm, Ray refused to make himself smaller. But the more he lived through defiance, the closer he drifted toward darkness. In the end, his story was no longer about the stage at all, but about scandal, prison, and an ending so cold it almost erased the spotlight he once lived under. Number 12. Bert Savoy. Bert Savoy did not need to be soft or flawless to make audiences remember him. He came out of vaudeville like a bright, stinging current, flirtatious, catty, and deliberately over the top in a way that made people laugh while still feeling provoked. Born Everett Mackenzie, Savoy rose with Jay Brennan, and by the early 1920s had become a major stage star, known for razor-sharp lines and a feminine presence that never asked permission to exist. But his life ended as strangely as the persona he created. In 1923, Savoy was struck dead by lightning on a Long Island beach. He flashed across the stage like something too outrageous to last. Then he vanished like a bolt of light. Number 13. Barbette Barbette did not need scandal to be unforgettable. The moment he stepped onto the stage, he created something hypnotic and unreal, so beautiful that audiences could hardly blink for fear the magic might disappear. Born Vanderclyde Broadway in Texas, Barbette turned tightrope and aerial performance into an act that captivated Paris in the 1920s. But what truly stunned people was not only the beauty of the illusion. It was the final moment when he removed his wig and revealed the man behind the soft, elegant figure that had left the entire room spellbound. In his later years, that magic was gone. Barbette left the stage, lived quietly in Texas, and endured years of pain and illness before dying in 1973. A man who once left the world in awe eventually disappeared as quietly as an illusion. Number 14. Carol Norman. Carol Norman won over audiences with a beauty so carefully crafted, so soft and so graceful that people almost forgot they were looking at a man. Born in 1897, Norman became a star of vaudeville, Broadway, and nightclubs in the 1920s under the name the Creole Fashion Plate, especially known for his lightning-fast costume changes and his elegant feminine image. But as the times changed, that glamour slowly began to fade. He died in 1947 at the age of 50. A man who once made the stage feel more dazzling in the end was swallowed by time almost without a sound. Number 15. Francis Renaud. Francis Renaud built it on elegance so polished that audiences were willing to surrender to the illusion. Born Antonio Auriemma around 1893, Renaud became an internationally celebrated vaudeville female impersonator, known for his soprano voice, his lavish wardrobe, and a stage image so refined he was billed as the original slave of fashion. At his peak, his costumes were valued at $50,000 in 1932, an extraordinary sum for the time. But like so many performers built on illusion, his glamour faded with the era that once adored it. He died in New York in 1955, leaving behind beauty, artifice, and silence. If these forgotten stars still fascinate you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay with us for more stories time almost erased.